Hello, everyone. My name's Kathy, and I'd just like to welcome you all here to our latest New South Wales Public Library Author Talk. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I extend this respect to all people joining us here today. My name is Kathy and I'm Programs and Planning Coordinator with Central Coast Libraries, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all and Judy to this event tonight. Judy is an established identity within the Australian television and film industry, and she has starred in television series such as Home and Away and Prisoner, and is the author of 16 novels. She's here to introduce her latest novel, Showtime. And this book is based on the Australian theatre industry at the turn of the 20th century, and it places a spotlight well and truly on Judy's ongoing passion for theatre. Ever the performer, Judy has prepared a presentation for us, including a short video and a book reading. So afterwards, we will take audience questions. So you can type your questions in the Q&A box and we'll get through as many as we can before we run out of time. In keeping with the novel, for those who have been lucky enough to read it, and it is only very, very new on the shelves in those bookstores, I'm going to introduce Judy as ladies and gentlemen. I now welcome the absolutely amazing, fabulous, wonderful, jubilant Judy, who is going to share some literary gems with us. Over to you, Judy.
Oh, well done, Kathy. You're a show woman, aren't you? Of the first order. Thank you. That was gorgeous. And well, I don't know, you said I'd prepared. Oh gosh, I don't know how prepared I am. I just tend to ramble, as you say, hopefully put on a show. It's very daunting to be reaching so many wonderful people, and you amazing techno wizards, you, for doing all of this. I can just barely turn my computer on. But anyway, here we go. And when I'm out physically on a tour, I always start with an audio. You called it a video, Kathy. Actually, it's an audio. So it just runs for 4 minutes. And I think it evokes a sense of what the book is about. It's actually made by my brilliant husband, author, actor extraordinaire, Bruce Venables, and he performs it and writes it and records it in a mate's professional studio. So it's got a good sound to it, hopefully, with all the tech things. Sometimes it doesn't come off, sometimes it does. But it'll be somebody else telling you about my book, and that'll be Brucey, who has a very nice voice, which is lovely. So I think if you feel in the mood, anybody just listening at home, whatever you're doing, just sort of like close your eyes and let it evoke these images and go with the flow. So over to you, Brucey. Let's play it.
My old man said follow the van and don't dilly-dally on the way. Off went the van with me own packed in it. I followed on with me old cockle in it. But I dillied, I dallied, I dallied and I dillied. I lost me way and don't know where to roam. 'Cause I stopped off to have one at the old Red Tavern and I can't find my way home.
That particular song was written in 1919, just after the conclusion of the Great War. But it relates to a much earlier time. It's the story of a couple who lose their jobs and can't pay the rent and are forced to do a midnight runner. They get a van and pack their belongings, but there's no room for the woman, and her husband tells her to follow the van. Unfortunately, she stops for a drink and loses her way. It was meant as a humorous look back at hard times in England during the second half of the 19th century, at the height of the Industrial Revolution, with its filthy mines, black smokestacks, undrinkable water, sickness and death. People were horrified by their living conditions and desperate to escape. The situation led to mass migration, especially to Australia, where gold strikes were weekly events, the air was fresh and clean, and newcomers could hope for a better life. Travelling circus stars Will and Max Worthing and their equally talented wives, Mabel and Gertie, were four such people who left for the land down under, and they are the principal players in Judy Nunn's latest novel, Showtime. From small beginnings, they created the Worthing brothers family, which grew into one of the truly great Australian show business dynasties. Showtime is a story spread over 4 decades, concluding at the end of the Great War. Along the way, you'll meet the divine Dolores, interpretive dancer, Artie and Alfie, twins, acrobats and fabulous magicians, Carlo and Rube, stars of the travelling boxing tents who go on to become entrepreneurs in their own right. Plus, Italian sopranos, snake charmers, jugglers, tigers, illusionists and actors extraordinaire. And throughout your travels in Showtime, you'll also meet Emma.
But that's me. That's me. That's me finally. Here I am, at long last. Emma Jane Worthing. Max Worthing is my father and Gertie Smead is my mother, although everyone knows her as the divine Dolores, creator of the Serpentine duds. I was born on February the 1st, 1901, only a month after Federation Day. Ma and Pa had of course been here for years before I came along, but I know the whole family history, which I'll reveal to you as we go along. Where do I start?
That's enough now, Em.
What? Oh, yes, of course. Sorry.
You'll get your chance later in the book. Showtime paints a picture of one of Australia's most colourful periods, from the gold mining towns and the travelling shows that entertain them, to the major theatres of Melbourne and Sydney, where the theatrical managements fought to outdo each other by turning their travelling shows into huge theatrical events. Glitzy, glamorous, glittering extravaganzas, which they all invariably advertised as the greatest show on earth. Neither plague, nor smallpox, nor the First World War, nor the great Spanish flu pandemic that followed would slow the spread of Australian show business. Australia's master storyteller, Judy Nunn, will take you on a journey you won't ever want to end in her latest blockbuster, Showtime.
Ah, thank you, gals. And yeah, thank you, Brucey. Doesn't he do a good job? To me, it is evocative and it gets me in the mood. I hope it's got everybody else watching in the mood. It does sort of set a picture and where we're at, which I think is great, because with the Victorian gold rush in the mid 1850s through to the 60s, etc., Melbourne really was, unbelievably, the fastest growing, most cosmopolitan city in the whole of the world. They called it very imaginatively Marvellous Melbourne. I could have come up with something a bit better than that. But that, from what I've read, yeah, Marvellous Melbourne. And it really was an immensely exciting place that attracted attention everywhere, in every country. So these people poured in by the hundreds of thousands and by ship to then take off to the goldfields. And over the other side of the Yarra, there was a whole tent city, of course, because, I mean, Melbourne couldn't accommodate this number of people. And then they all took off and this became known all over the place. So that in England and America, the entrepreneurs quickly did a subtle double take and went, my golly, where that number of people congregate, they will need entertainment. And of course, these entrepreneurs were quite right. So that following the gold rush, out came the showmen with the show women and everything you heard in the audio with these extraordinary acts. I mean, you had, bawdy burlesque, and you had music hall, and you had exotic animals and, erotic shows and goodness knows what, and along with it too, from America, very much minstrelsy. Now, minstrelsy, which of course I had to put a little note in the front of the book, actually, because these days, minstrel shows, which of course involve blackface, white performers performing in blackface with the cartoon black makeup and big white cartoony mouths, is considered absolutely repulsively, but rightfully so. But in those days, it was not. It was a very, very popular form of entertainment emanating from the States and very popular throughout England. And therefore, immediately the gold rush, entrepreneurs came in, there was minstrelsy. And just sort of to digress slightly, because I love this bit, interestingly, there were many Black Americans came out here with minstrel shows. It's something a lot of people don't sort of realise, that amongst all the white people doing the blackface, there were black people doing the blackface too, but they had the blackface with the big, very black face and the cartoony makeup, the same as the white performers did, which is bizarre to think of. And I have a gorgeous character called Irving Sayles in the book. Now, he is not a fictional character. He is one of the very few real characters. My fictional characters are very much based upon a whole amalgamation of real people, of course, but there are a couple of actual historical figures there. Irving Sayles is one of them. He came out here in, I think it was 1888, from America with a minstrel show. And he was a Black American. And I have him working with Gertie, who you met there briefly in the audio. Gertie Worthing, married to Max Worthing of the Worthing brothers. And Gertie, who's a gorgeous character, I loved her. And Gertie adored Irving Sayles, as evidently everybody did. Now, he was not only a highly talented singer, dancer, athlete, actually. He was a great athlete too, acrobat, actor. The man across the board was hugely talented. He was evidently a really, really lovely man. Settled in Melbourne, married a white woman and stayed, he died here in whenever it was, and was hugely respected throughout the industry. But Gertie, that I have this scene, which is based upon what I've read of Irving Sayles, but it's my fictional scene between my fictional character and the real Irving. And she says, while they're out on tour and there's minstrelsy in the variety show they're doing, and she says, Irving, don't you find this, the minstrel shows a little bit insulting to you people, etc.? And Irving has this greatly philosophical comment where he says, well, if you look at minstrelsy, Gertie, he said, you have the classic characters. You have the dandy, who's a bit of a fool. You have the plantation owner, who's a big bumbling, he's another idiot, etc. And you've got all these white people in blackface pretending to be black folk who are actually pretending to be white folk. So who do you think all those white audiences are really laughing at? They don't realise it, but they're actually really laughing at themselves. And that is the way Irving explained it to Gertie. And she thought, well, fair enough. And if that really was his, whether it was his way of easing his way out of this situation or whatever, I just fell in love a bit with Irving when I read a great deal about him in research. So that was the interesting thing also in theatre, that is a fact, that there was literally, it's obviously I'm making a few comments there about racism, etc., but there was virtually no racism in theatre. not in my experience of working in theatre too, which of course was my first great love, and not, as I researched, in these days either. You were judged by your talent, not the colour of your skin or where you came from, or even what your act was. I mean, I suppose some of the highfalutin ones, my Willworthy, who was very Shakespearean, etc., he would sneer at burlesque, beneath him, burlesque, that sort of thing. But actually, he respected the talent. Somebody came on with charisma and they're going to be doing some act that he thinks is hardly worthy of his own talents. He's still going to admire the talent. So I think that's another comment about the freedom of the theatre. Also, when, of course, homosexuality, hugely, no, who cared? You know, you know, what you did was your own business and you were either talented or you weren't. So I think it's that aspect of theatre that I also loved. Now, what is really interesting for me here particularly is in writing this book, I really felt that I had come full circle, because although I'm writing about a period way beyond my own experience in treading the boards, I mean, I wasn't performing in, you know, vaudeville and variety, etc. Although I have to admit, in English repertory, when I worked in England for nearly 6 years, oh God, we did pantomime, we did musical stuff, you know, these were greatly popular shows. So I did actually experience, I mean, that singing that My Old Man Said Follow the Van, that was me, out of rhythm, but on the note. I'm very proud of that because I really can't sing. But so I did have a bit of experience there, but although I am writing this book set in a period way before my time, there was so much I discovered that was really so compatible, which is very fortunate because there was a lot of travelling I couldn't do due to COVID for research. So there was a lot of research from my own experience. And in coming full circle, my first 2 books, you see, were based very much around show business. Absolutely. The first one, The Glitter Game, was based around television. Then just a satire, really, frothy book, great fun. The second book, Centre Stage, was based purely around the theatre, a much more intricate book going through 2 generations of theatre and having a real thriller aspect to it too. So I'm obviously wanting to spread my wings, but it was about my first love, which was always theatre. My first professional show was at the age of 12. So it was a long life in the theatre because television didn't really claim me until I was nearly 30. So long time in the theatre. And then the third book, which I'd sort of said to my publishers, yeah, well, I can write a book based around movies. I know a fair bit about movie making, but spreading the wings, you know, ever wider. I brought out my ancestors of my one day to become movie mogul in the Barossa Valley making wine next door to Dr. Penfold. So there was a fair bit of research had to be done there about things like viticulture and oenology for starters, but let's look at 1850 in South Australia. So I got carried away, and I'm well over 100 pages, and I still haven't, I think I've just got my movie mogul born, but he's, you know, he's just cocaine dealing in Sydney, I think, by that stage. I've forgotten. But anyway, it was a big rambling book and I loved it. And that set the ball rolling on my next great love affair, which was writing historically based fiction, which meant my fictional characters travelling through times that have really fascinated me in looking at our past in Australia. And they're meeting real characters from time to time, like in Showtime, like Irving Sales, The Darling Man, and all of this. So people always ask me, what particularly inspires you in writing these historically based novels? And it will vary hugely. And I've got this gorgeous, I mean, I love this. This is why I love my publishers, Penguin Random House. Love you. Now, they brought out this gorgeous map. It might flare a bit, but I've got to hold it up anyway. And all of these are books set all around, right throughout this entire country of ours. And I didn't know until they brought this map out that actually I have set a book, or sometimes several books, in every state and territory within the whole of Australia, with the exception, I suddenly remind myself, of ACT. I somehow couldn't find Canberra all that fascinating. Mind you, there would be heaps of stories there, of course, but maybe not ones that I am inspired to write. Anyway, there will be varying reasons why I choose to set a book somewhere. Now, to use an example, a book I wrote called Territory There, based in, as the title would denote, in the Northern Territory, that was purely inspired by Darwin, because twice annihilated in 42 years, first by the Japanese bombs in 1924 and then by Cyclone Tracy in 1942. Purely Darwin inspired me. Then another example might be down here, Maralinga, set in South Australia. Now, that was a particular happening that inspired that book. I call it my whistleblower book. And that happening was post-World War II. The secret to most of the Australians, but not the British and Australian government, of course, the secret setting up of the nuclear testing ground in South Australia, where they, with great gay abandon, detonated bombs with greater kiloton energy than both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which we at the time really didn't know about, and which, of course, caused irrevocable damage, not only to the country, but most particularly to our first Australians, because they just said, oh, well, nobody lives there. We could just blow bombs up. Well, of course, people did live there. It was a major source of water supply, particularly for the Aboriginal people. Shocking thing. Now, the final example is a book I wrote called Heritage, set in the Snowy Mountains. Now, that wasn't just a city, although it's mainly involves Cooma, and it wasn't a specific happening like Maralinga. It was a period in our history that I found very inspiring because it changed who we are. And that was the building of the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme and the influx of immigrants post-World War II, when we actually discovered what a lot we had to learn from the rest of the world, because we'd never travelled, and we were suddenly outnumbered in that part of Australia, outnumbered by people who spoke differently and who ate different foods and looked different. And the learning curve was for the Australians, not the migrants who simply wanted a better life and to rebuild their terrible lives from the catastrophic results of the European war in Europe. So it was virtually, to my mind, the birth of multiculturalism. So these are various areas where I've decided to place a book, because of these various reasons for inspiration. So now, getting back to Showtime, this is a, excuse me, I'll just do a swig. This is where, as I say, I've come full circle. I have the love affair of knowing that I'm writing about something I truly cut my teeth on, which is a great love of theatre. And now I'm coming back full circle to my second love, of the love of writing historically based fiction. Now, this was very convenient for me, in actual fact, because during these current terrible days we're going through, I couldn't travel, as I always do. When I'm researching a book, I do a lot of field research. I go immediately to wherever the book is placed, be it the centre of Australia, be it, north, south, east, west, wherever, be it travelling by light aircraft or four-wheel drive, and you name it, been there, done that. I love it. And primarily the book, certainly great sections of the book are based in Melbourne, because that's where my Worthing family came out to, the brothers and their wives, set up their entrepreneurial dynasty. And it's where my Carlo and Rube came out. just post gold rush, and they had grown up in an orphanage. They met they're Cockneys, and they met in an orphanage in London, and they came out actually to travel with the boxing tents throughout the goldfields, ended up becoming entrepreneurs. So Melbourne featured very heavily. And fortunately for me, because I couldn't go to Melbourne to research, fortunately I had lived and worked in Melbourne for a number of years, 4 years on the trot. And also I'd been to Melbourne with various theatre shows. I've worked in some of those beautiful theatres that I mentioned in the book. And actually, not only Melbourne, there's a gorgeous section of the book that goes to the Theatre Royal in Hobart. There's a gorgeous ghost lives at the Theatre Royal. His name is Fred. He's frightfully famous. I've worked the Theatre Royal in Hobart, which is the oldest continuously running theatre in the whole of Australia. It is glorious. So I didn't need to actually go there for research because that theatre remains as beautiful. It's been burnt down by fire. By fire, let's presume it's fire. But most theatres have. Fire is predominant in theatres, particularly in the old days when they used lime in the making of the lights, spotlights and things, and they ignite like there's no tomorrow. So the Theatre Royal has burned down a couple of times, but it's been resurrected to absolutely its complete glory as it was in its former days. And I've played the Theatre Royal twice. Unfortunately, I haven't bumped into Fred, which I would love to. My mate Jackie Collins, oh, that's what they used to call me, Jackie Collins, the first book I wrote, the Jackie Collins of Australia. I think times have changed. My dear mate, Jackie Weaver, I put her in the back of the book as a little bit of recognition. Sent her a book the other day, actually, to say, look at you, darling, you're famous now. Jack has seen the ghost. She swears she's seen Fred. I believe he exists. But anyway, this is another thing that exists throughout theatre, of course, the ghost stories, the superstitions. But getting back to the research, being unable to travel, I was able to, fortunately, rely upon the many great theatres that I actually did work all those years ago that still exist. We haven't destroyed all of them, fortunately, although a lot of them have gone, heritage buildings that should never have gone with the magic of yesteryear. I really bemoan that fact. And there's the gorgeous His Majesty's in Perth also. So, I pay tribute to these beautiful theatres and everything they represent. In saying that about this being so handy, my knowledge of my own treading of the boards, a strange thing happened that I was able to rely upon in my research rather than the travel, was the knowledge that I discovered in researching via the brilliant books that I read. In the bibliography, if anybody wants to read something about this period of Australian theatrical history, do feel free. There's a couple of gorgeous books I've mentioned there, that in essence, theatre hasn't changed all that much, nor have the people who inhabit it. For instance, the superstitions. There are superstitions that abound that existed back in the 19th century, one of them being the Scottish play. I'm sure most watching would know that the Scottish play refers to Macbeth. But do you know why? You're not allowed to mention either the title of Macbeth or any quote from the play, unless you happen to be performing the play, in which case, of course, you've got to get on with it. But apart from the fact that Macbeth is renowned, productions of it, for having shocking things happen during those productions. So it's not just the coincidence of this. The reason being that evidently Shakespeare did base his spell that the witches bring out on the scene on the heath, the three witches, double, boil and trouble, eye of newt and all of that. I'm allowed to say that because I'm not in the theatre. But that evidently, it's renowned, it's supposedly anyway, that that was a real spell that Shakespeare used in Macbeth. So, you know, you're putting a spell on your own show if you mention that. The other one, or a couple of them, is whistling. Whistling backstage or in the dressing room or anything. No, not allowed. The reason being that the stage hands up in the flies, the area way above the stage where you see magical things flown in, you know, they would relate as they are wheeling down great backdrops and scrims that are very heavy. And there are big hawsers, big ropes being operated in the wings on each side by other stage hands, bringing in further weights to counterbalance, etc. And between up there and down here in the wings, they would send their messages to and from with whistles, so that if you were to inadvertently whistle, you could end up with something very heavy landing on your head. So, I mean, that was obviously very practical superstition. The other one, very quick, is if you take a beautiful bouquet of flowers backstage to your favorite leading lady, don't put any sort of lilies in there, because lilies are used in funeral wreaths, and they could mean the death of the show. So all of these things exist. They do exist today. And the greatest of them all, of course, is the adage, the show must go on. I've got so many stories about the show must go on. And so many of them are here in the book, and the show does go on regardless of what you're confronted with. I think the greatest example to give of the usage of this as a great claim to fame would be the Windmill Theatre in the very centre of the West End in London. Great Windmill Street it's in, actually, off Piccadilly Circus. I did an interview there once, fabulous little old theatre, and throughout the bombing of London, throughout the entire Blitz, the Windmill Theatre, the show went on. I mean, the audience, when the siren sounded, the audience would be told, if you wish to leave the theatre, do so quickly and quietly, and they would proceed with the show. And then the actors would quickly dive down to the basement, which was a bomb shelter. But for years and years after that, the Windmill Theatre had great big neon sign outside it saying, "We never closed." So unfortunately, again, just touching on the whole situation we're all going through at the moment, the COVID situation, theatres have had to close, which is truly tragic. A theatre never goes dark unless it's in a tribute to some great performer or producer. They have been known to dim the lights, the theatre goes dark. It's like a lowering of the flag or something when somebody dies. That has been known to happen, very rarely. I think it was done, J.C. Williamson's theatre, James Cassius Williamson, JCW. I think the theatres went dark, or his particular theatre, in tribute to when he died. But they don't. When a theatre goes dark, which is the correct terminology for when it closes, these days, they are putting up a ghost light. And a ghost light remains lit in the theatre so that the theatre hasn't really gone dark. The show will go on. The show always does go on. So good luck to all of you performers out there. Now, I'm going to read you a bit of the book here, if that's okay. And it will actually, it's not a bad example of the show having to go on. Pretty dramatic circumstances. Now, the background of this, it's 1899. The Big Show Bonanza is currently performing at the Princess Theatre in Melbourne. The great Goldini's performance was coming to its conclusion, and the grand finale was to be an illusion of vast proportion. So vast, in fact, that it warranted the return of the show's master, Carlo himself. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," he proclaimed, a drum roll having heralded both his appearance and the import of his announcement, "the denouement for which you have all been waiting. The disappearing tiger. Everything you have read and heard of the great Goldini's mastery is about to unfold before you right here on this very stage. Behold." Another drum roll as he gestured to the OP side, opposite prompt. All three of them gestured in unison. Carlo, the great Goldini, and the beautiful Cassandra. While from the wings, two stagehands pushed out a trolley upon which sat a large cage. The tiger! Carlo bellowed dramatically and perhaps a little unnecessarily as a wave of gasps rippled through the audience like wind on water. Inside the cage was indeed a tiger, prowling restlessly, unsettled by the lights and the drum roll and the general commotion. The tiger, Carlo continued seamlessly, which through the mastery of the great Goldini will disappear before your very eyes, thence to be returned, dramatic pause for effect, as a kitten. He bashed the front of the cage with his hand, a signal for the animal to growl and slack back with its giant paw, either due to its training or its irritation. No one was sure, least of all Carlo, or for that matter, the Goldinis, who had bought the beast from a circus that was going bust. They didn't know its background. The big cat obeyed, baring its teeth with a snarl, whacking its paw against the bars, and another ripple of gasps, very audible this time, ran through the audience. A tiger turned into a kitten. Carlo emphatically enthused, pacing downstage, arms outstretched, embracing the whole of the house, a feat never before witnessed on any stage in the world. The music was about to strike up and Carlo was about to leave the stage to the Goldinis and their mime and the impressive display of special effects. But that was as far as he got. There was not a sound from the orchestra pit, and the gasps had become far more than a ripple. Both the musicians and the audience were alarmed, and with just cause. Behind him, the gate of the cage had slowly swung open, and the tiger stood there, facing directly out front, surveying the freedom that beckoned. The Goldinis, posed either side of the cage as they were, exchanged looks of horror. Neither could move. Husband and wife simultaneously rooted to the spot. Then the tiger stepped out from the cage, negotiating the 1 foot drop from the trolley with threatening elegance. The beautiful Cassandra gave a terrified scream and headed for the wings OP, while the great Goldini raced for the prompt side, equally terrified but cursing his wife. He'd never wanted to do this trick in the first place, but she'd insisted exotic animals were the latest thing, and the bigger the better. Cassie could be so dumb. Carlo turned to see what all the ruckus was about. He froze. The tiger was standing centre stage, its eyes following the direction from whence the screams were still audible. The screams stopped. Someone had shut Cassie up. The tiger turned its attention to the next distraction, which was Carlo. It took a step towards him, then paused, yellow eyes unblinkingly fixed upon this creature of interest. Those in the front row of the stalls were starting to panic. People were getting up out of their seats, prepared to flee. Then, "No, don't go," Carlo said, the voice of calm, but also the voice of compelling authority. "There's no cause for panic, I assure you. It's all part of the act." And they believed him. They sat back down in their seats. The musicians in the orchestra pit knew better. Being the professionals they were, however, they did not disrupt the performance, choosing instead to quickly and silently steal away. Carlo was left to put on a show. He faced the tiger. "Here, kitty," he said. "Here, kitty, kitty." And incredible as it was, there were laughs from the house. Nervous laughs, perhaps, but laughs nonetheless. So far, so good, he thought. Adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had them under control. He took off his tailcoat and, holding it out in front of him like a cape, adopted a matador pose. "Toro," he said. "Toro, Toro." He didn't dare jiggle the tailcoat as a matador might his cape for fear of agitating the beast, but this was showtime. He had to make things entertaining. The tiger, totally focused upon Carlo and perhaps intrigued by the coat, started to pad very slowly towards him, intent upon investigating. Carlo, equally slowly, backed away. "Toro, Kitty, Toro," he said. The mention of Kitty didn't raise a laugh this time, the audience holding its collective breath, not daring to break the moment. As if in slow motion, man and beast circled the cage, Carlo cautiously backing, the tiger following. Or was it stalking? Was it at any moment about to pounce? At one point, Carlo, in his determination to entertain, gave the coat a small jiggle, and the tiger swiped a huge paw at it. A shared gasp from the audience. A very taut moment. No, he decided he wouldn't try that again. But the tiger did seem intrigued by the coat, Carlo realised. "Tigers and kittens are very closely related," he said, keeping his voice calm in order not to excite the beast, but making sure at the same time it reached well out into the auditorium. The acoustics at the Princess Theatre were excellent, as he knew. "They're all just the same, really," he went on. "It's only a matter of size. Wouldn't you agree? Here, Kitty," he called once again, the coat still held at arm's length. "Here, Kitty. Here, Kitty, Kitty." No laugh, but he hadn't expected there would be. The circle was nearly completed now. They were back to the cage. Beside him was the open gate. Did he dare? He backed a step or two further. The tiger was beside the open gate now. Yes, he decided he did. Carlo jiggled the coat more vigorously this time, and as the tiger once again swiped at it, he quickly pulled his arms into his chest, the animal's paw missing him by inches. Then, in one swift action, he hurled the coat into the cage and stood facing the tiger, wondering which option would find favour. What's it to be, he thought, the coat or me? But as fate decreed, the tiger automatically followed the source of its interest, the coat. Its circus trainer had used a cape which the animal had always found irritating. With a snarl, it leapt into the cage. Carlo slammed the gate closed, giving the bars a brief rattle to ensure the catch had firmly locked, then whirled about to face the audience. "Olé," he said, which was another bullfighting term he'd heard somewhere. "Good Kitty." Adopting full showmanship pose, he again triumphantly embraced the house. "The tiger did not exactly disappear, I grant you," he announced, "but as you can see, it did become a kitten." Beat that, he thought, and he took his bows to thunderous applause, while behind him the tiger now slumped on its belly, ripped into the tailcoat, tearing it to shreds. Backstage, the adrenaline having instantly deserted him, Carlo threw up into a fire bucket. So that's an example, I think, of the show must go on, as it did, and as invariably it still does. So some rules of the theatre just don't change. Okay, Kathy, back to you. Have you got any questions or whatever?
I sure do, but congratulations, bravo. That was very well done. I enjoyed that immensely. I've got a question from Christine, and she's got, music is a great time machine. Do you have a playlist of 20s music to put you in the mood when writing? I think it's meant to be when writing Showtime. Did you have it in the background?
No, I didn't. But I tell you what, my husband is absolutely well. I mean, there's a great musician in Bruce. He's got a terrific voice. He had his own rock band when he was about 19, every 19-year-old's wish, of course. And Bruce he did the showpiece, the audio piece that you heard. And Bruce will call up music of any era and pump it out there to me. So Bruce does that part for me, not me myself. And, so hence, yes, he did a fair bit of that.
And Bruce is an author, of course, of historical, is it fiction still?
Oh, yes,
Historical fiction?
yes,
Yes,
it's
yeah.
fiction. Yeah, yeah.
And so do you do a lot of your research together or help each other with the research?
Look, we help each other a lot. I think the greatest help is writing is such a solitary profession that we're very lucky that I can put my head in his work. He can put his head in my work. His books are his work. My books are my work. But when we feel we've got to a point where we want to share where we're up to or talk about it, we can live in each other's work, which stops it being quite so lonely. And I think we're the envy of quite a few writers that I know. That's terrifically helpful.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. So when you're writing, what does it look like for you? Are you a plotter or a pantser? Or because there's quite a lot of material in here to keep track of. How do you manage to do that?
I have a whiteboard that I don't use for plotting purposes. No, I don't. But I do use hugely for particularly, well, in Showtime, certainly, but and particularly in books that have a greater family tree even. This is, well, actually, it's three families. It's the two Worthing brothers and their families, and it's Carlo and his family. So I certainly have it for family trees. When, the names of kids, when they're born, they die, all of this sort of stuff. I use it very much for that. And I also keep lists on the side of other peripheral characters who've come and gone. But I don't do huge, big plotting processes like that. The one thing I do make a habit of doing is that when I finish off writing, I will go into uppercase and I will write on madly where I reckon I want to leap into the next day. And most particularly if I have to take a few days off, I'm going into to do some, I was on the board of a couple of charity places and stuff like that for a long time. And I would have to take breaks. And then I would come back to when I'd left off, which is a very dangerous thing to do. And I'd be, I'm back here. Good. I know exactly what I want to do. And yeah, so my advice to so many starting out would be very careful about taking too long a breaks between your work without using this device, which I thought I just invented. I don't know if other writers do it, but it's a great ploy.
And it works. Yeah, that's the main thing.
That's for me.
Judith is asking, where can you get a copy of that map with all your books around it?
Oh, what do I do? Karen, my boss, is by my side. Isn't it just divine? Look at that. It's in a program. Can I say that they will be sent out? It's in virtually a program which is made up with all these little things. And look, guess what? He's got to get another plug. Why do I do this? There's a crossword on the back. And Bruce did the crossword. He gets a credit for that. But yeah, and Penguin Random House, my gorgeous publishers, can send them out to you, and you could would that be all right, Kathy?
Yep, that'll be fine. Yep, yeah, yep. We'll get them out there.
Fabulous.
Okay, so you mentioned before about characters and keeping track of the family trees and that. Did you have a favourite character in this book?
I've got a number of favourite characters. Look, it's weird. I mean, most people would probably say, oh, Gertie's so gorgeous, and she is. She's beautiful. I just love Mabel. I love Mabel in her practicality and everything. And of the men, look, I can't help but love Rube. He's an absolute bastard, but Kathy, I love them all.
Can't play favourites. Which authors do you enjoy reading? Is it their writing style or theme that interests you most to read about their works?
I don't follow any one particular author. I'll occasionally have a love affair with an author that I think, oh God, I love him or her. I did go through a love affair there with Lila Shriver's books because she's so sort of, even the ones that haven't really won me as much as the post-birthday world, I just adored, but even ones that I haven't, truly, I still love her because she's so zany and all that. But I love Richard Flanagan's Narrow Road to the Deep North. I'm currently reading Amor Towles' latest book, The Lincoln Highway, because I so adored A Gentleman in Moscow. So, yeah, there's so many books I love. I can't really name them. It's a book I'll usually, adore rather than follow a specific author.
And I guess they all resonate at different times in your life as well, too, about what you like to read. I've got another question here about a show business term. What about the expression break a leg? Where does this come from?
That's a funny one, actually. I can only sort of like make that up as I go along. It's bad luck to say good luck for theatre people. You don't want to say good luck. Good luck is bad luck. So I think they say break a leg because it's Murphy's Law. But if you say something that's terrible, then the opposite will happen. Actually, the good luck, the most popular good luck wish among actors is chookers. Chookers, CHOOKAS, chookers. That's what we always say to each other, in a card you send backstage, or chookers. Somebody told me at one stage many years ago that it came from the Bolshoi ballet and it emanates from some Russian word. I've never found that to be true. I've no idea, but I suggest look it up and see where. I think I'm going to go and do that right now. But chookers is what actors use, and good luck, I can only think break a leg is the opposite of good luck. You don't say good luck.
Now, I've got another question. It's how long did it take you to write the book?
2 years. I'm 2 years a book gal. So I've become quite reliable in that regard. It would be about 6 months in the research. Gorgeous Brian Dorr once said to me, if everybody knows Brian Dorr, he did those beaut double acts with John Clark, sadly no longer with us. Brian Dorr, terrific writer, terrific performer, and all of that. He once said, isn't it funny, Judy said, the writing part is the easy part. It's the thinking part that's difficult. He's wrong. The writing part isn't all that easy, but he's right. The thinking part is coming to grips with what you're going to write, what period I'm going to set, what my inspiration is, what my main protagonists, who they might be. It's all the thinking. And then once you do start, the rest will take over. So that will be about the characters will take over. I've heard other authors say this, and it's certainly the case for me. That will be about a year. The actual writing of the book will be a year, but at least 6 months, the thinking, and therefore then researching part. And while I'm writing, I'll be researching as I'm going to, because I've discovered the exact books that I want to research from and all that.
And Adam has popped a question in there, which is kind of maybe an inspirational question. He is from the ACT and wondering if you would consider writing a novel set there. There would be some great stories from the origins of Parliament and its early days.
I shouldn't have said that when I was showing the maps. I'm terribly sorry. What was our friend's name again, Kathy?
Adam.
I'm so sorry, Adam. Oh, please forgive me. I actually have a cousin and her family who live in Canberra, and I'm very fond of Susie. So, she'll be on the phone to me saying, how dare you be so insulting too. Look, I'm sure there are great, great stories there. I think probably in my facetious comment, I might have been a little bit of self-centered up there in the way that I don't know enough politically. I have my political opinions and all. I mean, who doesn't really? But I would like a little bit more knowledge. So I'd have to do a lot of research there. So maybe one day, Adam.
Okay. Have you written any plays for the theatre?
Yes, I have. I wrote a play called Rooftop, which was accepted by the Playhouse in Perth, and they did a workshop production of it. That's the only play I've written. I've written some things for telly and scripts and radio and review and that sort of stuff. But no, I haven't, apart from Rooftop. That's the only stage play I've written. I rather liked it. I think it would be dated now. I wrote it a long time ago.
Yeah, and we've got a question here from Deb. She's about to venture to the goldfields with Will and Troop and can't wait to see what comes next. Love your books. What was your favourite theatre experience?
Oh, my favourite theatre experience. Oh gosh, there were so many. I think working with John Sumner at the Melbourne Theatre Company. John Sumner was terrific, and I did a Shakespeare at the Athenaeum Theatre, The Winter's Tale, and I did a Shaw at the Russell Street Theatre, which was Man and Superman, playing Anne and Man is a wonderful role. There are so many, and I had so many funny stories of the theatre I could have brought up. I should have done a funny one then, but that was wonderful. Some wonderful roles that I've loved playing.
And now this is a question close to my heart, and it comes from Suzanne. Why do you love libraries?
Oh, every author loves libraries. Well, particularly if you're going to be writing historically based fiction, as I do. Whenever I go to these various places where as I said, I do field research, I go to these amazing places. First port of call is always the library. Get in touch with them in advance. They're always so welcoming. And because not only will librarians point you to the books that you need, as opposed to all the people who bump into, oh, you're right, you must get this book, you must get it. You'll have a pile of books that high and you won't be able to have time to end up writing your own. The librarians will be able to pinpoint you to the exact right. And in many of these places, of course, librarians are actually local historians. They know and love their areas so much. They know a great deal about it. And even if they don't, they know the people that do. So they will point you in the right direction to the historian that you need. Love library.
Oh, thank you so much. So all those librarians out there listening in right now, best life ever. Thank you so much for that lovely glowing report for libraries. Carol, I've got probably time for one or two more questions. Carol has asked, I wonder if your books will be made into films.
Look, I've had film rights bought of a number of my books. Actually, one book, Marilyn, I've had the film rights bought twice. The rights of Khaki Town are currently out there. Litter Game was picked up immediately. Look, I'll believe it when I see it, seriously. When a book comes out and it's pretty hot, people will sort of, will grab it up and, pay just enough for two years' rights to stop others from getting at it. You know what I mean? And then, so, I mean, a number of friends of mine, or people that, not necessarily friends, but people who know what they're talking about, said, well, why don't you write your own film treatment, apply for funding, whatever. But I've written the book. I don't want to then change the genre and have to sit down and do character breakdown, film treatment, sales pitch, which is what you have to do in selling a movie, and then hope that in 10 years' time it might be made. So, I mean, if there's any film producer out there clocking in here and you want to get serious, get in touch with Kathy or me or Peg or Random House or whatever, and you can have the rights for sure. I would love to see movies made out of my books, but I'll believe it when I see it, as I see.
I mean, there's certainly the potential in
Yes.
this one.
Yeah.
Hold it up the right way. And so we are unfortunately running out of time now. So I'd like to just extend a very, very big thank you to you, Judy. It's been an absolute delight chatting with you. And yes, we would rather have hosted you in one of our beautiful libraries. But tonight has been fabulous, and you've just reached so many people. And there's lots of messages coming in about how inspiring you are for people who read your book. So a big thank you to you.
Oh, look, thank you, Kathy, Christine, Amy, all of you people who've clocked in. Thank you so much. It's been a real privilege. I've had great fun. Thank you, darling.
Welcome. And for everyone who's joined us tonight, a big thank you to you guys as well too. It's wonderful to have your support. There are more author events coming up, so check with your local libraries and the PLN Author Talks, which is what this series is. There's more coming up shortly, some in the daytime as well too, so you don't have to be night owls. And if you would like a copy of your very own, you can get in touch with your local independent booksellers and have a chat to them. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. I'm sure there's, even if you're in lockdown, there's all sorts of deliveries and click and collect and all that kind of thing going on. Otherwise, of course, your local library is most likely going to have a copy on the shelf, and I would get in touch with them and say hi to them. But for now, it's goodbye. Bye, everybody.